Centrepoint, a charity in the UK, have released some very shocking statistics recently. Well, not so much shocking as in they are just really horrible. Youth homelessness has risen by 40% in 5 years. That's what they say. So Centrepoint estimates that about 121,000 homeless or at risk of homelessness are present in the youth population in our country, showing black people disproportionately affected as well. Now, this belongs to a more long-term trend, of course, of living standards not improving and stagnating, and increases in poverty and homelessness since the Conservatives took power in 2010. Obviously, there were some negative trends from 2008 onwards because of the global financial crisis, but generally during the I've criticised the last Labour governments many times, and I'll continue to do so because they did a lot of things very wrong. But one thing you have to give them credit for is poverty was genuinely reduced, living standards genuinely did improve, wages genuinely did increase. Then the global financial crisis came around and a lot of those gains were temporarily lost, but they could have been brought back and then improved upon even more. But of course the Conservatives pursued a policy of austerity, which reduced the amount of money that was going into essential services and going into the pockets of working people. So, there was this kind of thing was bound to happen. A lot of people have argued and continue to argue that there are various different circumstances that have caused these things to happen. So in this instance, usually people say, oh, well, it's the pandemic, right? And first off, the government should always look after its people and provide for its people whenever it can. And it very much could have done during the pandemic and did do to some extent anyway with things like the furlough scheme. Those kind of things can just be expanded and improved upon, but the government chose not to. And secondly, addressing that point, this is something that has persisted through various different crises. Right? It's persisted. It's been happening since the Conservatives took power in 2010. But through Brexit, through various different general elections, through the pandemic, all of this has been a period of stagnant wages, declining living standards in many places, and rising homelessness and poverty rates. Those are just the facts. And as much as people like to say, well, I've heard a lot of Conservatives say things like, these poverty statistics are dodgy, or it's people who are actually not that badly off, people who actually do have a bit of money and things, and that's just not true. But say Obakin, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, apologies if I'm not, the chief executive of Centrepoint, which is the UK's leading youth homelessness charity, said that the charity estimates that about 86,000 young people in the UK presented to their local authority as homeless or at risk in 2016/2017, and that the figure increased to 121,000 in 2019/2020. So these figures changed dramatically before the pandemic, right? Before the pandemic. And of course, there was a fairly decent, it had a lot of holes in it. There was a fairly decent housing scheme during the pandemic that the government implemented, but they've essentially stopped doing that now. So, people are right back to square one, and a lot of people, their lives have gone demonstrably worse. And Obakin expressed fears that youth homelessness would get worse, that it would be exacerbated as a result of the pandemic. With Centrepoint's helpline receiving a record number of calls since the start of the crisis. Now, the article that I'm referencing here is by The Guardian, and it's written by Amna Modin and Toby Thomas. Now, I'd recommend that you all go and read the full thing because it's a good article and that's what I'm referencing. But they also talk about how it's disproportionately affecting black people, and it's clear that this is a trend that's been going for a while. We have to start asking ourselves, why is that? Why is it that in the United Kingdom, a country that is supposed to be, highly developed, highly prosperous, free, democratic, compassionate, in a society like ours, how on earth can it be that ordinary people are getting a worse and worse end of the deal, while the very richest, the ultra wealthy, the super rich, the richest 0.1% in the country, get richer and richer and richer, and their wealth just expands and multiplies constantly? During the pandemic, working people collectively lost billions and billions of pounds, and the richest 1% gained billions and billions. In fact, I believe it was hundreds of billions. Or that might have been since the Conservatives took power. But either way, the richest have gotten richer and everyone else has gotten poorer. And that's not just the poorest. That's not just like the bottom 10 or 20% people who are, very, very low income. It's literally everyone. The middle class itself is shrinking. And I think most of us in our lives aim to live a middle class life. Most of us don't want necessarily to be extraordinarily wealthy. We want a nice house, with, a family, and most people want that, and a stable job that you enjoy, fair working hours, good pay, basic stuff like that. The middle class is being eroded constantly. It's been kind of, all of that wealth has been kind of sucked from that and going to those people at the very top. And of course, the same goes for working class people. And it's affecting ethnic minority communities even worse. And it's already bad for a lot of white people in the working class. And that just speaks to how terrible these things are for ethnic minority communities. And let's be honest, the Tories won't care. They won't do anything about it. I'd love it if they did. But generally what happens is with the Conservatives, when there's a big cultural kind of wave of people becoming very switched on, a real revelation with regards to just how pervasive racism is and just how systemic racialised poverty is in the UK. Whenever that happens, the UK government, and this is, Labour governments to an extent have been guilty of this as well, but the Conservatives are really, really quite, they're specialists at it, will launch a report, they'll launch some sort of parliamentary investigation, and then it says, yeah, there is a problem. And then they talk the talk, and they talk about how they're gonna fix it. And they're not racist, and they believe everyone should have a good chance at life and everything. And then, dilly squat, zilch, nothing happens. It's a depressing thing, it really is. And these statistics show young people are really being screwed over. We're really being screwed over. And the Tories are talking about bringing back the imperial measurements as well. Just rubbing salt in the wound, But in all seriousness, this is a huge problem. And the Conservative Party are not doing anything really about it. Homelessness is on the rise. In-work poverty is on the rise. Wages haven't been rising anywhere at the level they should have been, and for the last 10 years, we just had the worst decade of wage growth since the Napoleonic War. House prices have skyrocketed way beyond the increase in wages over the years. Worker productivity is the best it's ever been, right? The best it's ever been, and if it had grown in conjunction, if wages had grown in conjunction with increases in productivity and inflation, the minimum wage in the UK would be something like £19 an hour. If you go all the way back to the end of the 1960s. Now, I know we didn't have the minimum wage back in the 1960s, but you get what I'm saying, right? So, clearly, something isn't right here. And there are obvious solutions. In fact, Finland implemented an anti-homelessness program where they saved money. They saved, I believe it was something like, I think it was maybe 10,000, 15,000 US dollars, if you convert it. So, you know, it was cheaper to house homeless people, to give them care, to give them all of the resources that they needed to make sure they could get back on their feet and you know, become self-sufficient, go out there and, you know, do what makes them happy and sort of, you know, have their own fulfilled life. That's cheaper than treating them like dirt and putting them through an overly bureaucratic and very humiliating, paltry benefit system. It's far better, and also I'm relying on charity, you know. Clement Attlee said something very profound, I think. I believe it was when he was Prime Minister, but I might be wrong. And he said that charity is a cold, grey thing. If a man wants to help the poor, he should gladly pay his taxes. But obviously, the Conservatives don't really want to raise taxes on the wealthiest people in society. They've raised corporation tax, which I think was needed. But they're paying for this new social care plan, which is terrible anyway, with a national insurance hike. So, from all angles, we can see exactly why this is happening. Wages stagnant. The quality of jobs is going down. Right? The availability of decent jobs is going down, even though the young people are the most educated workforce in history. You know, you have increases in taxes effectively with this national insurance hike. Student loans are more expensive now. They're going to be hiked even more, I believe, or at least the threshold at which you pay is going to be lowered. And house prices are astronomical. The NHS is being privatised more and more and more every single day. Education is underfunded, and we don't have a decent anti-homelessness programme, which would save us money anyway. We could literally eradicate homelessness and save money. So we know why it's happening. Ask yourself, why is the government not doing anything? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic in the comments below. So if you want to, just leave a comment and yeah, I want to know your opinions on this. So hopefully this stirs the government into action. I'm not hopeful though. Thank you all very much for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.